Hello, B. Mitch.
Happy Thursday, Brian. How's it going?
Happy Thursday. It's going well. Better than Wednesday was because I had a migraine.
Oh, well, glad it's better.
Yes. How about you?
Going all right. Another day talk about OCI is always a good day for me. I'm just weird like that.
You're in the right place then.
So looking at the calendar, and I'm guessing that next week we will probably skip.
Greetings.
Greetings and salutations.
Salutations. I love that word. Next Thursday is Independence Day, where we declare independence from meetings. I am going to cancel the dev call unless, Brennan, you think you want to keep it for some reason?
I was throwing on the agenda to skip next week, so I think that sounds good to me.
All right, perfect. We'll just let everybody know, but I'll go ahead and
Also, apparently the UK election day,
oh, it is. Oh, that's right. It is.
which is just hilarious.
That's kind of funny, yeah.
And then isn't the day after there's like a related Canadian holiday, like July 5th is like Canada Day or something. Right?
Canada Day. I like Canada Day. I need more holidays.
Oh, Canada.
Oh, Canada.
Canada Day is the first, apparently.
Oh, it's the
according
first. Okay.
to Google Calendar.
Well, what I don't know.
I'm not good at these things. So, Jory, did you get access to the OCI calendar to add
I do. Yeah, I can add and delete. I just deleted one.
Okay.
Actually, should jump forward and probably delete
I just saw that. The OCI authentication working group, we're kind of indefinitely on hold. I don't know if you want to.
Oh, sure, I can do that.
Mark that as like ending on a certain date, and then we can come back later on and turn it back on if we decide to.
Yeah, I can maybe have the second be the last day, so that's next week if you want. Would that be?
I'll mark the 25th because we haven't been having a meeting for like a month or so now.
Okay. Okay, then we'll just do that.
And there is also the FreeBSD working group on Fridays. That would be good to add.
Okay, let's do. And do you know what time that on Fridays that is?
Off the top of my head, I don't, but they do have. If I'm going to keep doing all this on a separate screen to semi-share, I can always share my desktop here. Share. I was over here already doing this stuff. So they have got a group over here. It says meetings every other Friday beginning May 24th. And now they claim based on GMT. I don't trust that. Because usually when people claim GMT, daylight savings time kicks in, they're like, oh, actually, we are based on a US time zone. Is Sam here yet? I do not see him in the list. Sam would be a good person to ask. They have a channel over on Slack.
Okay, I'll just get confirmation in Slack. I did just update the Tuesday call, so now that's off the calendar for the time being.
Yeah.
Until you guys want to bring it back.
We'll eventually hopefully get there, but I figured no need to give people false hope right now.
Okay.
Cool. Well, we're 5 minutes after. Already doing some good administrative stuff. So for anybody that missed that, we just canceled next week, July 4th. So skip that one. And I figured maybe a quick one here. We've got a couple conformance reviews are sitting out there. And Sajay is here for that. Oh, Sam, you showed up. Before I jump off the topic, the FreeBSD working group, is that based on GMT time zone, or is it going to be based off of a US time zone come daylight savings?
We have not decided that. I think we'll have to figure that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll let you discuss internally and then let Jory know, and she'll throw an item on the calendar for you. Cool. So yeah, there are a couple of conformance PR sitting out there for registries. This one I'm biased, it's my own. We've got a handful of maintainers over there. Tianan's on there. Sajay is not on there. I need to throw Sajay over here just to give him more responsibility, because I think that's what he's looking for.
Yeah.
Anyone else that wants to be a reviewer over here, this repo is pretty chill. It is basically people come in and say, hey, I've got a registry that conforms to X, Y, and Z. It's all distribution spec right now. But we just kind of give it a quick look and say, yeah, thumbs up, thumbs down, and add it. So I am more than happy to put more maintainers on this list. You know, the people like reviewing PRs around here, aren't there? Oh man, the stunned silence. I will harass people in DMs at some point here later on. But yeah, this repo itself pretty chill, and just about all we do over here is just give a quick double check, make sure that, or at least all I do, a double check and make sure that some of these things look right that we're changing. And then after I review some of that text over there, I'll come back and look at the actual preview and make sure that when I preview this thing and click on whatever, which I did pick that up on ACR, Sajay, I saw that other couple PRs sitting out there. I didn't dig into why. But yeah, the registry's in there. And then usually what I look at is a test report. It's the big thing I look at. And just kind of click through a couple of these, make sure the registry is doing good stuff, make sure they actually enabled the tests that they wanted to run. And there's also a how to reproduce step to look at here. And so gives an idea of what commands they ran, just kind of make sure they're giving decent instructions for their registry. Once all that looks good, you come in here and just give it a quick review and say thumbs up, and we get this stuff merged. So making folks aware. I think the only person here that is on the approval list right now is Tianan, but we can always add more. So I'm a fan of adding more maintainers on this little side project. All right. The other one, while we're on conformance, these are kind of quick. I don't want to spend too long on these. ACR, which Sajay put the little gray check. See, if you're going to check one, I got to add you as a maintainer, Sajay. That's all there is to it.
I was wondering if, I mean, I'll ask Shuey if he wants to be a maintainer, because he's also fixing bugs on this. So
Yeah.
mine is cursory, right? I don't get time to do this, but having people who actually do the work might be good.
That would be good too.
I'll check with him if he's okay.
Yeah, give a chat and then let's see what we can do on that. And otherwise, I saw some back and forth on this one saying that they're working on the issue for folks that have no idea what I'm kind of hinting at. If you look at the preview on this, there was a bug fix where this doesn't do anything. Click, 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 nothing happened in there. So it's something to do with the spacing in there. And so there's another PR that's already opened up to fix that. But again, pretty similar idea. You go down here, look at the registry, make sure the test report, the reproducibility steps are all good there. And I think this is the second one you've submitted, because there's a 1.0 still in there and a 1.1. And I think you're the only one that's done that. You get to break new ground.
I mean, just to maybe share with others, this test suite is super useful. I think it's valuable to maintain, even if people don't submit it as a uh, into this. Like we've identified a bunch of bugs on the ACR side and whatnot. So I think it's valuable, but it's like you said, it's a chill repo. It doesn't get much activity unless there is a problem. So it's
Yeah. The conformance tests themselves are over in the distribution repo. And so the distribution spec repo has the conformance directory that they're running. This is just the output. So anybody that kicks something off and wants to go out and see who's run this, who is maintaining it, can go do that. And at some point, I got to ping Josh and say, do we want to pull out Bundlebar? I think that one got dropped a while back. But yeah, this is definitely a chill repo. Super easy to maintain. It's just getting a couple eyes on things, making sure people aren't submitting garbage or spam or anything like that on the website. All right. I won't dilly-dally on that too long. One last website thing to look at here. The chain guard logo for anybody that hadn't seen it. Container site. It is a PNG right now. It doesn't have the right vertical separation on there. More importantly, in that PR, and I got to thank Josh at some point on that one because I had put out a issue saying, hey, we need to fix this. There was a logo.svg file that got added in at some point in there. And that SVG file was not named right. It shouldn't have been called logo.svg. It should have been called chainguard.svg. And then it was kind of disagreement of whether the PNG or the SVG. I picked the SVG just because I could actually go into the XML and change the height. And when you change the height in there, it suddenly looks really nice on the web page. Gets vertically aligned. So that was the method from Madness over there. Hopefully this is an easy one to approve. I have no idea who has approver access over here. I could bug Chris, but I don't think we need to do that. Sam doesn't have a green check. We need to figure out how we get you a green check, Sam.
Yeah, I don't know why I don't have one.
We need to fix this. You need more green checks in places. I have no idea why I do have a green check, honestly. So somehow they gave me one. But yeah, little small one. Anybody that has access over there that wants to, give it a look, give it an approve, and that'd be like, I don't want to go too long. See, Tianon has a green check. How does Tianon get the green check in Sandbun?
I know I probably shouldn't, but you know, I do, so I merged.
I
Don't trust that
approve.
guy.
I
Nobody
don't think
should
we need
trust
to
that
take
guy.
the green check away from Tianon. Tianon, you can keep that.
No.
All right. So we didn't have much to talk about in image specs, so I kind of peeking back through some of the old issues. And this one kind of caught my attention just because of our conversation last week. And so kind of wanted to go way back to 2021 where someone was saying, hey, do we want to add Blake 3 as a supported type? Just kind of figured if anybody wanted to chat about this real quick, it seemed like an interesting topic. More than anything, what to make the prefix, because we have SHA-256, SHA-512. Do we just call this Blake 3 or do we want Blake 3-256 because it can be different lengths? B3, I think I saw someone saying in there. Did anybody have thoughts, opinions on what it'll look like if we add that? Should we add that? Should this be closed and never touched again? Because adding more hashes into this thing is just chaos. Stunned silence, as always. That works as well.
We got to say Blake 3 a few more times so that John shows up. That's one of his trigger words. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, John Johnson.
I thought it would be interesting if we at least kind of decided what the prefix should be. So this was saying B3-256. Just figure out, throw that out there. We didn't have anything else on ImRespect to chat about, so this looked interesting.
My knowledge of Blake 3 details is about a week old. so I'm probably the wrong person to opine on this, but are there non 256-bit versions of Blake 3?
I believe the length of this is arbitrary within the Blake 3 protocol. You can have its variable length.
256 bits, arbitrarily extensible.
Isn't that just fun?
What does that mean? We need a Blake 3 connoisseur on the call to explain it to us.
Apparently. I think we're stuck with him showing up here at some point. He can't hold back now. We've said it too many times.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one I just figured I would kind of drop that idea out. If we want to, if not directly support it, at least quasi support it by saying what the prefix would be. I feel like that would be interesting.
Yeah. And part of that would be deciding what do we do about arbitrarily extensible? Are there reasons to support that? Do we need to take that into account in the prefix?
Yeah, I think the B3-256 was saying let's limit it to 256
Yeah.
and not arbitrarily extend it.
Yeah.
But that would always give you the option later on to say B3-512 and make it extensible.
And then we get to grapple with the multiple hashes to the same content that we technically have now, but in practice, everyone should be using SHA-256, and so it doesn't matter.
Indeed. And mine is currently in draft state for handling that. Of course, going to talk about over here how to specify a digest. I've got this from the PR that we were chatting about. I kind of split the manifest reference into saying, hey, if the reference is a tag and you also want to include a digest, here's the syntax with the question mark digest, and then add the new endpoint. I don't have conformance tests for that because we always want to have some kind of conformance test, and I don't have an implementation that does it yet. And so I'd like to do those two things before saying, here's a change to the spec. So that's why it's sitting in draft right now. And then once we do that, all chaos breaks out. Because someone will get the crazy idea they actually want to implement multiple hashes. All right, so enough chatter on Blake 3 for one day. John didn't show up yet. I don't know what's wrong. That was all I had for image spec, unless anybody else has other things you want to chat about over there for that. Otherwise, I got some stuff on distribution spec. So this one, the 404 on blob deletion, I think this is just a conformance test tweak. This was a simple one. Got a few places where we were checking whether or not it's 200 to 299, whether it was a not allowed, what was that, 405? And then I add the 404 in there if we just clean it up. So let's just go ahead and, delete some other content in there. So, or allow the registry to have already deleted the blob before we got around to doing it. Some registries are quicker than others. So just a quick little conformance tweak. Let's see, on this one, we've got Mike, if you've got a chance to look at that one, that would be an easy merge, I think. I like just naming people.
Haven't looked at it yet. I'll take a look.
Yeah, I think this is an easy merge. It's just adding a few error codes that are allowed on the cleanup step of our conformist. So they've already passed the rest of the
Did we talk about that last week or?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
just paging back in memory. Okay.
Yep. No worries. I keep throwing these on the agenda so they don't get forgotten.
Gotcha.
Here's the other one we were chatting about a whole bunch last week, the registry versus repository terminology. I might have gotten our discussion summarized here, which when we were talking about repository, we were saying, hey, let's kind of redefine instead of saying it's a namespace and using the bracket name down below. I just call it a scope for API calls.
Mhm.
And then I said it's for a collection of content. And so we're saying it's manifest blobs and tags. It's just kind of an aggregate of that content. And I didn't get any more specific than that. And so that kind of
Perfect.
gets out of some of the conflict of people that are saying, hey, you know, different scenarios.
Scope
people are trying to
implies
solve.
namespace, but it doesn't say it. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
You have my LGTM.
Sweet. Yeah, because there's some other spots in here we were saying the manifest not found in repository. So I think if we keep repository abstract enough, those are all still okay. And then that hopefully clarifies it for end users. And now I remember what the debate was of whether or not repository actually includes the registry name in it. Since this isn't talking about the reference at all, I think I've avoided some of that conflict. It's just a scope of API calls, and whether that API call includes the registry name or not is kind of getting a little bit into the weeds of individual implementations.
Yeah, you succinctly called it a scope, and that's appropriate.
I'm trying to pick the word people agree to. It's not easy around here, but it can happen sometimes.
It's not.
It's the fun of dealing with specs and everything. All right, if everybody's going to keep being a little chill today, if there are more on this, we can keep chatting on it. We chatted on a bunch last week, so hopefully we're pretty good there. The other one over on distribution spec was the repository name length limit that we were chatting about. And so I went ahead and put the PR out there, which was just saying this is an implementer's note and just commenting that a lot of clients have this limit and it's on the registry host name, the optional port, the slash, and the name value. All that needs to be below 255 characters for some implementations out there. And so for compatibility, you might want to try to avoid making stuff that's longer than that. And
yeah, I took a look at that while you were talking on the other topics. The only thing it's missing is the context, because it introduces additional elements that weren't disclosed in the top. If you open up above 155.
Scrolling up there. Can I scroll up there? Yeah, I can. Yeah, this was specifically talking about pulling manifest, but it's kind of the only place we were really.
Yeah, but it doesn't talk about registry host name or port, right? Or which slash we're talking about. It's not. I can't map what you wrote here to what was above it.
So the name field is above it. The registry name would go all the way up to the definitions at the very top.
It wasn't in there yet. I looked.
Like all the way up line 63 would have been theoretically.
Yeah, those are word definitions, not the API specification.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying it's just the registry host name. And so what a registry
I know what you
is.
mean. It's just
Yeah.
that it doesn't fit with the section it's in. Exactly.
Is there a better place to put it?
It would need an example, right? Of what the limit would actually be checked against.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. It's just not, it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah.
I think the reason I put it here was this is where we actually specified this is the name regex for the name field.
I can't read that regex.
Yeah, but we were saying this is the one and only place that has the name field actually defined of this is what this must match. And this regex here did not have a length limit in it. And so I think my thought process was if we're going to say here's the regex, I want to put the note right adjacent to that saying, hey, that expression didn't have a length limit, but there are clients out there that do.
Right. You see what I'm saying? It just needs an example or some way to go from the API to pull a manifest to where this would be checked.
What other folks think? I don't want to hog the conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, everybody's going to be quiet again. I think. So we have on this. Dion gave me a check. It's not green though. I need to put you as a maintainer over here too.
Yeah, I get what you're trying to say, and I get the context, and I understand. It just doesn't read. That's all.
Okay.
Because
Yeah,
it
'cause there's-
introduces new fields that weren't in the API, or at least not described in the API. They're sort of there in the name and sort of, but it doesn't. We didn't define this explicitly. The domain includes a domain, for example, or maybe it doesn't in this case. I can't remember.
Well, registry host name is whatever the person is typing for that. This is really going back to what a reference is, and we don't define a reference.
There you go. Yeah.
So I'm trying to be,
Yeah.
I'm trying to give people enough of a hint of saying there be dragons without having us define an entire new spec as part of this implementer's note.
Hey, you could just say something like, for example, when doing an image pull for a manifest, from a Docker.io, for example, on a port, it would be this length, and you could show an actual string, and you could say that the client would normally have a limit on the length of this string.
Okay.
It's okay to say, for example, I don't think, right?
Okay.
Or
Especially
a common usage.
exactly a common usage. Yeah.
So registry.example.org/repo name would equal this amount of length of characters because of
Exactly.
that plus that.
And then it all follows what you really mean, right?
Okay. I think I follow that. All right. I can work on that. Everyone else good with this? I'm not following the chat so closely, other than Tianan being sad. All right. Let's see. This one I pulled in just because it's been sitting out there forever. As part of our release notes. Hey, Mike actually put a green check on that one. I'm just teasing you now. This is part of our release notes in there. Some of this was just cleaning up some markdown, changing dashes, and putting brackets around things because my markdown linter is more sensitive than what other people use. But the big addition was adding, where is it? So let's see, we'll follow all these steps. There is a step at the end where it was just saying, hey, go add the release notes on the website. And I've been doing this as we do releases, but it's just one of those things that we got a request that, hey, don't forget to update the website. That's kind of part of the OCI obligations is that we publish this stuff, announce it. So got that. It's been sitting out there for a long time. We've done a release since we've had this PR setting open. So if folks have opinions one way or another, raise them. I believe it's been a while since I looked at this. I think there's entries in here that are pointing over to like runtime spec. Yeah. Runtime spec is referenced in places like this. And yeah, that's kind of the stuff that I also cleaned up in there, turned into distribution spec. Just because it's good to actually put the proper spec name in some of these things. So raising some awareness on that. Otherwise, and that's if anybody else around that wanted to do that. Otherwise, that was everything I threw on the agenda. And we went through that a lot faster than I figured we would. We've got free time to chat about any of this stuff that we went past too quickly. Or if folks are really anxious to get out here, we can always break early, or we can talk about other stuff. Or we can talk about why HackMD suddenly went into dark mode, and that's really awesome.
we could talk about Kubernetes and pod images. What the heck is that? A little bit.
Do we want to talk about that's we're kind of getting into that quasi area we don't have a good definition for right now of the pod spec kind of stuff. Is that what you're getting at, Mike?
Yeah, a combination of that and also reusing the OCI image. Just want to make sure people understand that that's happening, that Kubernetes at the pod level would like to be able to load an OCI image, okay, and mount it as a volume with a band mount inside of every container in that pod, or at least the containers that have a mount map from the image, as opposed to from an actual host path source to to a particular directory in the container. It's interesting. It's going to allow us to load LLMs, at least the various information that you would store in an LLM, like weights and stuff. So we'll be able to load those and other types of images, but we're not to the point of understanding how to do the refers, Brandon. It just doesn't seem to be happening. So basically, what we're going to do when we pull an OCI image, we're gonna have this concept that, okay, well, you can also use this image ref, this ID or digest, to actually mount a volume when you start the container, and we'll convert in the Cry API. We'll go ahead and convert any mount request that normally would have been from a host directory to actually loading the image and grabbing a snapshot for it. It's not really a host path, but it's a namespaced path that we can mount, that we will then subsequently mount using run C.
I believe looking at that PR, it went through a whole lot of changes, but I'm pretty sure they settled on only supporting images with the image layers and not arbitrary artifacts. So not even getting into refers, but doesn't even support arbitrary artifacts with different kinds of media types for the layers.
Yeah, there's nothing stopping somebody from pulling an artifact that has layers in it. And there's nothing stopping us from being able to support other artifact types on the pull or some kind of a refers.
But could support and specify as part of this KEP are kind of like degrees apart.
It's being punted. Yeah, the refers, it's interesting. That was the initial request. I want to be able to pull an artifact. And then when you got into the details, no, I just want to be able to pull an image. It's gonna be an interesting reduction problem for us to figure out how to use the refers API in the Kubernetes pod kind of cases.
Yeah, my comment on that one was trying to dig into what that does as we get more and more complex with this, because you've got a volume we're trying to mount that might have an artifact that might have multiple layers of different media types, not necessarily a single layer and not necessarily in tar file format that would be the normal layered file system. And when you add refers, you might have multiple artifacts. And so if you have multiple matches on that thing with multiple layers, you get this problem where you're getting a lot of stuff all thrown into that single volume. And how do you decide what gets mounted where within that volume?
Yes. It doesn't really fit the pattern that we've been using images for. So, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll probably need a different API entirely.
I don't have
think it's interesting to figure out, okay, when we're talking about how would these other higher level users of our specs use these things? How are they going to actually use them? And until we've actually created our own pod spec, right, our own pod definition, I guess, in OCI, and how these artifacts would apply to that. And how are they going to do this? Is this going to be something that the SBOM team, for example, would say, when mounting in a container or as a pod, this is how this data should be used? Are we going to be getting that kind of stuff specified by the artifacts? And if we are we going to need an additional type, like some mountable declaration? Is that something we want? I can see some artifacts, yes, they're going to want this. Some aren't.
I think a lot of the people that are doing it right now have tools that are focused on just one artifact type.
Yeah.
And they
Helm chart.
also, Helm charts, signatures, SML, attestation, that kind of stuff. And they need to include on top of that what to do when multiple entries are found. Is that's put into the logic. Maybe they're looking at a create timestamp, pick the newest one. Maybe they support multiple and they merge them together, but that's a per artifact type decision per implementation.
And even within that one artifact type, it's not just a decision for that artifact type, it's also a decision for the other higher levels languages, like pods. They're going to have different ways that they want to affect and use these artifacts, right? And it's also the application writer. Maybe the app writer wants to see their SBOM for a particular reason, like they're going to do a switch on some particular implementation detail. Yeah, it's like, well, how do we want these things to be used? Probably needs a little more use case definitions, or at least it's going to make it a lot easier. Let's put it that way. If we have some actual use case definition to expand this. Otherwise, what you end up with is people trying to use our specs and our APIs without having any shared context across other app writers, right, and other users of the specs.
Yeah.
No, anyways.
Well, Sajay's still here, surprisingly. This is one of those areas that Oras and RegClient have both been kind of playing in, of how do you support this kind of generically between different tools out there, of when they're pushing artifacts, when they're pushing refers, how do you select them when you retrieve them?
I think filtering is becoming a big challenge along the way. We limited the spec to just the artifact type, just because otherwise it ends up becoming a whole graph relational database problem more than just a content addressable store. I think that's a challenge. And there's some really interesting implementation where because Mike kind of brought up the whole pod discussion, we have been toying with OCI image or artifact mounted to pods for like quite some time. I remember I did a prototype with Vanessa. Finally, it's now a cap, and hopefully it'll land at some point in time. I don't know how that will change with referrers and things like that. So
the cap on the volume source, on the OCI as a volume source, that merged.
Oh, sweet! I subscribed to that issue, but I hadn't followed. I mean, I remember that prototype was
It merged without details on the CRY API and without details on the volume mount, and it's changing back and forth in the actual PR, just pushing the code. So it was more of a vote to get this done.
That's cool. Yeah. Vanessa and I were just kind of like playing with this at that point in time, and just made an OCI volume mount into it, and it's great to see that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get that done this release for both Containerd and Cryo. It looks like we'll have the ability to, on any image you pull, actually be able to mount it as well with a special mount request. So you can pull an image for at the pod scope or any other scope you want.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it does make sense. The order of operations still needs to be talked about, right? Is the pod mount higher level than the other, or do you just go in the sequence that they provided it? Probably that's what we'll do.
Yeah, I know we're digressing from OCI, but most of the conversation around that was how confidently can we share it across pods and namespaces, and what's going to be, because those are layers, and
yeah,
we're
going to cheat. We're going to cheat. What we're saying is that when you request a mount on this particular type of mount, which is going to be indicated by the presence of an image ref, right? That mount will be pulled, and we'll figure out how to make that happen at the runtime, as opposed to when you pull the image, we'll give you an actual mountable host path, which was all you had the availability right now in the current mount list, right?
Right, and what's the secret and what's the scope of the actual mount would be interesting, because
well, you'll get that mount on the container create. It'll be
okay.
we want to mount this image into this container.
And
Okay.
it's just read only, right?
Read only, and we're cheating as well. Read only for now. I don't see why we couldn't, but that's going to limit, which type of file system you're using and whatnot. Has to be the same if you're mounting the same file namespace. Yeah. You can't do certain kinds of mounts in an overlay file system, for example.
My hope is that implementation will bring out something for OCI, right? Like some most likely annotations or some behavior patterns that say that, hey, this is how we want to outline what an artifact that is mountable looks like.
Okay. Yeah. I think we need to do that. I think is to at least as a prerequisite into all these other, artifact types, that they should define that.
At least right now, the KEP says they need to have the typical tar layers that they're going to do the overlay file system like they do for images today. So
that means config can't be used if,
I think the assumption is that this is going to be just another image file system that you could do a Docker build into a Scratch file system and generate.
Right. So the runtime would select then whatever runtime handler you used in that pod, and how that's configured, which snapshot or which type of file system is being used for that in that cache.
Yeah, it's going to be the same snapshot they're using for the images normally.
Exactly.
And so all the tooling they have to extract the images, they're just going to reuse that for extracting this volume. So that might go counter to some of the thoughts you've got, Sajay, of let's pull in a bunch of different random artifacts and put all the data in there. They're looking at it very much as let's mount an image inside of an image.
It's another layer.
Yeah.
Or set a layer. Yeah, that makes sense.
Doesn't mean we can't in the future expand for artifacts. They're just not ready yet. I think we started throwing too many questions at them. They're like, no, let's compress this down to the minimum viable, what we can get done today.
Yeah. The title went from OCI artifact, right, as a volume to, image as a volume.
Yeah, and technically speaking, we would be able to bundle a set of that into a single OCI layout and mount. So even if it's let's say an image with a set of, so there was an interesting prototype where people actually attached weights of the model as referers. And if they are going to be dynamically composed, then it would expand to, can I actually bring the model plus the weights and mount them together? Otherwise, we'll end up with a small bunch of mounts. But how do you define this and all is very, very ad hoc. So anyway.
So now I'm very curious. Are you fine-tuning the model with extra layers?
That seems to be a common pattern, right? Like you have a model and then you generate an additional set of weights along with it. And this was, I think it was shown in KubeCon or something like that, where you would attach these as referers or at least bring them as attachments. But the problem is if you don't modify the original image, then you have these things that are just kind of like floating around the side. So, but if you have a capability of mounting an image directly into it, can we bring in more into the same OCI layout when the mount happens? So my hope is the KEP, when it puts it out there, doesn't at least has provisions for, or at least considers the fact that it's not just going to be the single image, but it might be a full OCI layout that we can merge or do a UFS or something on top of. But I'm not sure.
Yeah. From the KEP, I think it was considered, but they punted it into the future.
Yeah,
So
it'll take
that's-
time. It'll take time.
The refers part, yeah.
Right,
Yeah, we-
definitely.
Without some language describing, okay, now when I pull an image, add this flag and it says, and for these types.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Exactly.
That's different.
Yeah.
But there's no reason we couldn't do a plurality of pod level images that are mounted into the container with the, the mount to declaration
Right.
in each container, or other types of containers like ephemeral, whatever, for debugging, that sort of thing. I don't see a problem with that. I tell you the truth, I don't know what would happen if somebody today pulled an artifact if it was and tried to load it as a container. I don't know. I know, mind blown. Would it work or would not?
Yeah.
As long as the config's there, you're going to get a runnable container.
This is
But
exciting.
it would need to be a runnable container if that on the container image. However, for the pod, I don't think it's going to fail because we're not going to actually try to run it. We're just going to load it as readable. So
I'm less mind blown and more thinking about spontaneous combustion and mass explosion and chaos. But they're both close to each other.
code fix. So we're going to have to test it out. It's going to be fun. I think what else? There's a bunch of other pod level things, but you guys probably aren't too interested in SIG multi-networking or SIG networking requirements against. On the run, just sort of a heads up here, I really think we've got to define what a pod is. And here's another reason why. Okay. When you want to have a network in one of these strange OCI containers, you have to actually instantiate the network before the container is created, right? We create the network namespace. We call CNI, we do a whole bunch of fun stuff, right? And then we create the containers and they attach themselves to that namespace. And network namespaces are very important, right? And even for the AI thing, we need specific types of additional accelerator network devices that can be attached, logical network devices for this AI use cases. Where for example, the NVIDIA controller, accelerator is using a different network to make this happen. We're not getting into this pod space at all, and I think it's going to become more important.
I'm trying to figure out where we draw the proper boundary between stuff happening in OCI and what's happening in Kubernetes, because pod is, if you talk pod too much, you're getting a little bit too Kubernetes specific, where there are other runtimes out there that don't even have the concept of a pod. They just spin up individual containers.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely a gap.
Enough, we can create, if it's user namespace, we create the network namespace and run C and then come back out as an OCI namespace now that was created for Kubernetes to then use for the pod. So it's
So we've got this gap between the image and the runtime spec that there's stuff we want to define, like it'll be nice to define what a ref is. We haven't defined what a reference is anywhere else yet. It's all sitting over in distribution or containerd or other places. So that would be good to standardize. But there's a lot of other stuff like where you're getting at right now. And so I'm trying to figure out how far we go in wanting to define that versus trying to keep a clear delineation between Kubernetes specific implementation stuff versus generic stuff that would apply to all runtime implementations.
Right. And I think we handle that pretty well with things like indexes and stuff, for multiple platforms, What we haven't done is have an index for a set of containers. And I'm running into these issues a lot, all the time, right? Without any standard way to define these, it's just a pain in the butt.
Thanks, Ajay.
See you, Sanjay.
It is one of those places where there's a lot that we can do. I'm just trying to tread carefully that we don't overstep too far and overstep into the Kubernetes space, but also overstep out of the space that other implementations count on us for and say, oh, wait, we don't implement that kind of stuff. You know, you're telling us when you do this to be OCI compliant and we don't. So I want to.
Right. Yeah. I don't think we need to specify what a pod spec is or how it's defined or how it should be used. But in the context of the containers themselves, we own the runtime. And we're disconnected, disjointed, if you will, from the users of the OCI at the higher level. We're only specifying at the run C on purpose, I know, right? And at the image level for distribution APIs and for the image spec. But we're missing this opportunity to fix some other thing so that we can, show how it should work in a set of containers that are sharing a namespace, that are sharing isolation. Those are the kinds of things that we're supposed to be defining, and we're only doing it at the container level, and it's not working completely, especially not for networking and shared files and yeah. All right.
Yeah, I'm thinking, does run C define networking at all?
Hey, no.
Or
it can create a network namespace. It defines network name in the namespaces. Network namespace is one of them.
Okay. So references to it, but doesn't get into detail. Yeah.
Well, it's required. Yeah. The network namespace is required to be available before Kubernetes networking, and or container runtime networking can be employed. So it's a disconnect. Sometimes we create the network namespace for that container. Sometimes we create it for the pod first, right? Sometimes we need the runtime to create the namespace when it's user. We could do it, but we use the runtime, we overload, we use the runtime to create a pause container with the network namespace, and then we reuse that user namespace, network namespace across, right?
I'm going to strategically take the last 5 minutes to go in a slight tangent here, which is to ping Sam on a question. So hopefully he's still around paying attention.
I'm here.
We got the FreeBSD working group going on. And so I'm curious with the FreeBSD working group, what they would think about some of the thoughts of multi-container pod kind of namespace stuff. Does that fit at all with the concept of the FreeBSD jails and what they're doing over there, or would that get completely outside of what they're doing?
I did miss the context of a bunch of that question. So I don't know. Right now, the focus of the FreeBSD working group is primarily how do we enable OCI and, CNCF-ish container stack use cases on FreeBSD using the existing jail capabilities that are present in FreeBSD. And there's been a couple things where some of the FreeBSD maintainers who are involved in the working group have gone through an enhanced jail functionality specifically for OCI containers. A big one is that prior to a few months ago, it was not possible to bind mount, to do the equivalent of a bind mount of a single file. And now it is possible to do that on FreeBSD. So there's definitely interest in making FreeBSD work well for these kinds of use cases, but I don't know specifically about the kinds of things that you're asking for. For network namespace, there isn't a separate there aren't namespaces the same way on FreeBSD that there are on Linux. And so right now, the only real proposal that we have for how to do things like pods that share a network is nested jails with a parent jail that owns the network and then child jails within that are the actual containers for the pod.
Would
Got
you
your
ever-
answer, Brandon. Answer is
Yeah.
yes. Nested.
And so possibly the direction I'm going is, would you ever consider FreeBSD as like a Kubernetes potential node in that kind of environment of having FreeBSD workers?
I mean, there's certainly interest in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't think we're close to that yet.
That's fine. But I just wanted to make sure we weren't going too far outside the direction. I'm trying to think of the different users that are out there, and also strategically just wanted to
Rancher.
say,
Yeah.
It
There
was
would
also
be multiple users. Yes.
it was also strategic of, hey, what's going on with FreeBSD? Let's get someone to chat about that for a second.
Hey.
We don't hear enough about what's going on over there, so I figured to give you an opportunity to jump in.
Cool.
Thank you, Sam.
Yep.
Cool. I don't mean to cut you off there, Mike. If you
No, I was
had
kidding.
something else you want to chat about for a few more minutes,
I
go
like where
ahead.
you went. I like where you went with it. Yep. I mean, we could, if we went that way, we could always invite all of the other, players as well.
Yeah.
I get a lot of requests for the Rancher guys too. Or
Well,
we
I
do.
know if we look at developers today, if they're developing outside of Kubernetes, a lot of them are on Docker, but there's potential other environments out there they'd be running. But they're not running a full Kubernetes environment with multi-node containers or multi-container pods right now with everything merged together. And so I'm just trying to be sensitive about making sure we don't step too far.
Definitely don't want to do that. No.
Cool. Well, this has been productive for me. I've got one more PR to update here, and we've at least gotten something merged. So little bits of progress each week.
I think you had 2 LGTMs today.
Nice. Awesome. And for anybody that missed it at the beginning of the meeting, next week we are off, 4th of July. We're celebrating the UK election. And we will be back the week after that.
Cheers, everybody.
All right. Thanks all.
Bye.